Hi, everyone. Welcome to Backstage Classical Conversations. I'm your host, Katrina Stroud, and I'm a classical violinist pursuing my master's in music at the University of Michigan. In this series, I invite esteemed classical musicians onto the show and interview them to tell their stories and give advice to share with others and preserve their legacies. Today, I'm joined with the incredible violist Molly Carr, who has such a powerful story to share. For those of you who don't know her, Carr enjoys a diverse musical career as a recitalist, chamber musician, educator, and artistic director. She has performed across North America, Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, and has been featured in the New York Times, Forbes, the Wall Street Journal, as well as on CNN, National Public Radio, and BBC World News. She was honored in 2018 at the United Nations and awarded the Pro Musicus International Father Eugene Merlet Award for community service for her work as the founding director for the nonprofit Project Music Heals Us. Ms. Carr is also the recipient of international performance prizes and awards from the Primrose International Viola Competition, Chamber Music America, and Music Academy of the West Alumni Enterprise Awards, among many others. Ms. Carr is the violist of the Juilliard String Quartet and the Carr-Petrova Duo and has collaborated with many of the world's leading artists. She appears annually on many of the world's premier stages and is also a frequent performer and faculty member in festivals around the world. Ms. Carr is the founder and artistic director of the award-winning nonprofit Project Music Heals Us, an organization which creates compassionate communities, builds unlikely connections, and defies social barriers by bringing high-quality, interactive music programming to individuals in the carceral systems, healthcare settings, and under-resourced communities. Ms. Carr serves on the viola faculty of her alma mater, the Juilliard School, where she studied with Heidi Castleman and Steve Tenenbaum. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me on my podcast. I'm so honored to have you here today. So what was your musical background like, and can you talk about how you started the viola?
Well, first, thank you so much for having me here,
Of course.
Katrina. It's a pleasure to be here. So, my name is Molly Carr, and I play the viola. I'm a classically trained violist, and my background is that when I was 6 years old, I was homeschooled. My mom was homeschooling both me and my sister, and she wanted us to be well-rounded humans. And it turned out that there was someone moving into town who was starting a homeschool orchestra. And
Oh,
so
okay.
my parents asked me, what instrument would you like to play? And apparently I said the drums, and they said, yeah, no, we're not gonna deal with that in our house every day. So do you have a second choice? And I was like, well, okay, well, violin. And so, yeah, started playing violin Suzuki when I was 6 years old and discovered that I really actually had an affinity for it. I remember being shocked that my teacher would like pull me up to the front of group classes and say like, here, demonstrate, and would like, I thought I would die from those experiences, but somehow survived and just continued practicing because it was just what part of my life was, is what my mom told me to do, so I did it.
Mm.
But really, when I was 10 or 11 years old, my violin teacher at that time wanted to start a chamber ensemble, and she only had violins in her studio, so you need a viola for a string quartet.
Mm-hmm.
And so she pulled together 3 of her violinists, and we literally in her living room drew straws, and I drew the short straw, and I got handed a viola, and I'm not from a musical family. I mean, my I that's not entirely true. My parents are extremely musical, but they're not musically trained. They're
Mm-hmm.
scientists, and so this was like, viola? What is this? So when I got handed this viola, it was like, I like to say it was basically plastic. It was a really not great instrument. And my parents just like a year before had invested in a pretty nice violin to like
Mm.
continue my journey on violin. And
Yeah.
so they still are upset with me to this day that like I was handed this total crap viola, and I had this beautiful sounding violin, and it didn't matter though. There was something in that sound of that
Mhm.
instrument, of the viola, that just grabbed me, and I never looked back. I never played the violin again. So, so, and we still have it. We still have
Oh,
it.
wow.
Yeah, but it hasn't been played in a long time. Um, yeah, and so that was how I came to meet the viola, and I like to say the rest was history, and the rest was just, this beautiful, happily ever after, but it was at first a honeymoon phase of absolutely falling in love with the instrument and exploring everything it could do, and then,
Mhm.
yeah, life got complicated, and just like any relationship, choosing to stay with that relationship has been quite a journey, but
Yeah, for sure. And, who were some of your musical mentors growing up, and how did they affect your development?
some of my musical mentors, actually, it's really interesting. I have just behind this screen, I have hanging up in my music room here a picture of Itzhak Perlman. He has a poster that I bought when I was probably 8 years old. I went to hear him in concert. He came to Reno, Nevada, my hometown,
Mhm.
and I was just blown away by this musician. I thought, he was basically a god. And I still, and like I said, I still have that poster,
Wow.
and getting to see that concert, and now, like, seeing decades later, I teach at his festival. I grew up at his festival.
Wow.
Him and his wife, so Itzhak Perlman and Toby Perlman, have been just like godsend, yeah, directors of so many students' lives. But I would say the two of them have been hugely impactful in my life and my development. I mean, there's so
Mhm.
many people. Definitely also my someone I called my viola mommy. And once I decided that I really like this instrument, and I think I want to do this for life, there was a violist, a viola teacher in Reno who used to be the principal violist of Rochester Philharmonic, went to New England Conservatory,
Mhm.
studied with Joseph Silverstein, just like had this amazing pedigree. And she married someone who his hometown was Reno, Nevada. And so when they got married, she came back to Reno, Nevada and would sub with the San Francisco Symphony. And so I just lucked out. I ended up being like one of maybe two or three students of
Wow.
Ginny. Virginia Blakeman is her name, and
Mhm.
she just gave absolutely everything. Without her, I wouldn't be living the life in music I am today. She changed everything for me. She gave
Mhm.
everything. And I
Yeah.
think also having her as a first viola mommy and seeing the amount that she gave to her student has really impacted me for life, and seeing this is what it means to be a real mentor, a real
Mm.
caretaker, a real teacher for a student in this age and beyond. Oh man, I could go on for a lot. This is like a huge question. I have so many. Yeah, my other teachers, Heidi Kasserman, Steve Tenenbaum. Now my colleagues. There are so many people that every day I look around and I realize that I'm just really, really lucky to have them in my life, to lean on, to converse with, to play music with, and to
Mhm.
guide.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Those are great mentors, and we're definitely so lucky to have them in our life. And then what eventually led you to decide to go to the Manhattan School of Music and Juilliard, and what are some lessons you learned in college?
Yeah. So going back to the straws, when I got handed this viola, this weird thing that was so mysterious and wonderful, I got really into it. And within maybe 2 years, had announced to my family that I was gonna be a professional musician. They were like, "Yeah, okay, what does that mean?" Um, and that I was gonna be a concert violist, and so, um, part of that path then was suddenly realizing, okay, does and that's when Ginny, my viola mommy, came into my life, and she had so much experience and opened the doors for me to look like, okay, if you want this, then you do these competitions, you take these auditions, you go to these summer festivals, and she pushed in different directions, and so one of those directions was the Perlman Music Program with Itzhak Perlman, and that was from age 14. Another direction was, again, competitions, and this was, when it started out, it was just kind of like, "Oh, this is cool, this is, different, this is, like, a little scary," but then when I started winning them, that was terrifying. That was, like, so scary because then it was like I was in my own little silo of, like, with my viola mommy in Reno, Nevada, away from any conservatories, away from any, you know, Juilliard pre-college, San Francisco
Yeah.
Conservatory, any of this. I was just doing my own thing, and so to suddenly have a national view of like, "Oh my gosh, wait, so I'm supposed to be good, but now I have to, like, stay good? Like, this is really
Yeah.
scary." Yeah, and so I, started to sort of develop this, like, "Ooh, wait, this is, like, so it's maybe not all fun. Do I really
Yeah.
want this? Uh-oh." And, but that it was still very clear at that point, especially as things started to develop with festivals, competitions, all of this, that like, okay, yes, it is gonna work out. We are gonna go into this career path. So
Mm.
the obvious choice for me from going to the Perlman Music Program was all of my student colleagues were all going to Juilliard, Curtis,
Mhm.
or Manhattan School of Music. And
Yeah.
so I auditioned at those schools, and the teacher at Perlman Music Program, Patinka Kopek, was teaching at Manhattan School of Music and asked me to come there to study with her and also jointly study with Pinka Zuckerman. Yeah, and so that it just felt like that was where I needed to be. And so I went and I did 2 years at Manhattan School of Music, worked my tail off, because yeah, it was like a kind of a terrifying switch from the mountains of Reno, Nevada to, like, the concrete jungle of New York City, and, like,
Yeah.
coming from being homeschooled as well, I was like,
Right.
I whew, that was a big switch. But, yeah, so I came to Manhattan School, did 2 years there, and then just felt that it was time for me to be at Juilliard. It just I don't know, there was something in my head and heart that it seemed really clear that I needed to also have that experience, and so I transferred to Juilliard and finished out my undergrad and my master's at the Juilliard School with Heidi Castleman and Steve Tenenbaum,
Mhm.
and so yeah, and so that was just sort of like, "All right, you decide you wanna be a musician, like, you go to conservatory, let's go and do this." And so I just, paddled on, like, on a treadmill, "Alright, this is what you do," and so went into conservatory, and I would say some lessons learned, I mean, again, from, like, being a naive little blonde girl from Reno, Nevada, and, like, appearing in the city without my parents for the first time and,
Mhm.
like, living a totally different life and entering conservatory. I would say I learned so many things whether I wanted to or not, but looking back, I'll say what I wish I'd learned.
Okay.
I wish that I had learned already, 1, how to say no,
Mhm.
2, how to make space for myself, because in the chaos of the music world and the chaos of a conservatory, it can be extremely overwhelming, and I wasn't equipped, I didn't know how to do that. So I think I could have gotten a
Yeah.
lot more out of it. But I think also I wish that I had had more fun. I feel like I
Yeah.
came into conservatory and I was like, well, this is the path. I'm on it. This is what needs to be done.
Mhm.
And and it and it made it so like there are opportunities for, you know, enjoying where I was and enjoying New York City and making friends that I passed on. And
Mhm.
looking back, it's really the friendships out of those years that have done the most for my career for the rest
Right.
and for my life so far.
Yeah, for sure. So on your website, you have like your whole story written out, which is like really amazing. And you go into detail about your career journey. And you talk a little bit about Hattie Castleman's influence. Can you talk a little bit about that during your time at Juilliard?
Yeah, talking about what I wished I'd learned.
Mhm.
I feel like she was the one that was always like the Zen goddess that like would come and when I would be like "Ah!" and then come into lessons, be like, I don't know what to do about this and I'm overwhelmed and I want to do this and I can't do. Then she'd be like, Molly, creativity needs time and
Mhm.
space. And that again, just that's basically what I just said. I wish I had learned that instead of like I was like, yeah, okay, sure. Yeah. But I still want to do this and this. But yeah, she was someone that like saw into your soul and is someone that sees into your soul and
Mhm.
saw like layers of conflict and growth and needed growth. And we would sit I remember at the start of each school year and at the end of each school year and just sort of talk and assess. And she was like my therapist in a way that she was just like we would talk through all the things that happened, all the things I wanted to happen, and she would come back with just these really simple comments that just were like I wrote them out and I have them like stuck around my room to this day. And
Mhm.
yeah, and one of them was like I said, creativity, Molly, creativity needs time and space to flourish. And I
Mhm.
wasn't giving myself that. And
Mhm.
it took a while to like push to be able to do that because the time and space is something where actually to dig down deep and to really like engage with yourself and to understand what is it that you actually want to be doing rather than what the world wants you to be doing
Right.
is a very powerful place to find and
Mhm.
and engage with. And the second big thing that I have written everywhere is a Heidi Castleman quote, which is, when you find what you love, fear is an afterthought.
Yeah.
Because I feel like even in just our short conversation so far, I've already talked about like how the first time I got pulled up in front of a class, I was terrified. That's
Mhm.
scary. And then going and winning competitions, suddenly it was like, oh, that's scary. Like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, wait. So if I want this career, I have to be this level. What if I fail? That's scary. Right.
Mhm.
And so yeah, just having these extended, deep conversations with Heidi, she would remind me that, like, there is power in finding what you love. There is power
Mhm.
in taking time, space, and calm to really feel how you're made, how you're built, and what you're built to do. And when you find that and when it really lights you up, everything else seems easier. And so
Yeah.
all the fear just sort of becomes all the anxiety becomes something that you can handle, that you can
Yeah,
walk through. So,
for sure.
yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And also, part of your story, it seems like a big turning point was getting injured and taking a break from viola to be a nurse's aide at Red Cross. Can you talk about this time and some things you learned?
Yeah. So, after graduation from Juilliard, after my master's, I launched into a career that I thought I wanted. I had said I'd wanted since I was, 10, 11, 12 years old, and was going on tours, was playing chamber music, was doing recitals, was, you know, being challenged in all the ways I thought I wanted to be challenged. And the more I did it, the more I ended up feeling just like a hamster in a wheel and empty and afraid. And it just wasn't, it felt gray. It felt, why am I doing this? And so I started to question whether I'd made the right choice or if it was time to make a new choice. And I started calling home to say, Mom and Dad, I'm having trouble. I don't I don't think I want this to be my career anymore. It's really not filling me up the way that I thought it would, and it has in the past. And of course, my parents were like, "Yeah, too bad. Get back out there." We have invested a lot in this career path, and you're not going to give it up. And so, and also just thinking it's a scary thing to come face to face with, like, wait, have I lost my passion? Am I actually on the path that I want to be on? And do I want to make really big changes? And so, actually, fortunately for me, I got injured. I was on a tour across Israel, and the night before the first concert, actually, I shattered a glass bowl into my left hand, and ended up with little shards that doctors and surgeons couldn't find for months.
Wow.
Did a number of surgeries trying to find glass. And it just,
Yeah.
anytime I would put my finger down on a metal string, I would hit the glass, and
Ugh.
that's just not really possible to play like that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so during that time, I, I didn't play. It was a perfectly timed traumatic gift
Mm.
that it
Yeah.
was like, okay, well, I've been saying I want to part ways with this career path. Whoa, you mean I can't play anymore? you know, it
Right,
was
yeah.
like, whoa, what is this? What are we doing now? And so I actually moved out of the city. I went and started living with my grandparents in Guilford, Connecticut, and I saw they had lost their nighttime home health aide. And so they
Mm.
asked me while I was there if I could take over and be that person that could help them in all the ways that they needed help. And I discovered that I loved it. I loved it. It was the most Heidi Castleman, like, zen, like, at peace I had been in years.
Mm.
And it made me think, like, wow, so maybe should I try my hand at nursing? And so I signed up for a nursing aid course with the American Red Cross. I spent, like, all of my money, my last cent, to go and take this course. And part of that course was carrying hands-on for patients at the end of our training, of our, like, book training and class training. We had and actually do a residency in a nursing home. And so I was assigned pretty early on in the residency to a late-stage Alzheimer's patient whose name was Ruth. And I was told by my supervisor that Ruth was someone who was at the stage of her disease, that it wasn't just her mind that had forgotten, it was her body. And so she
Mm.
spent her days locked up in pain, and yeah, would have to be moved by a crane. In
Oh, wow.
any interaction with her, just it brought pain, and she could only scream. She hadn't spoken in years. And so I was warned as I went in to take care of her, like, this is a tough case. And you need to, even though it's a tough case, you need to harden your heart, get in there, deal with the screams, get your job done. You're on a short timeline. You need to get on to the next patient. And so
Mhm.
I tried to do this and I failed. I couldn't handle, I could still hear the sound of her screams, and that I just couldn't do it. And so instead I broke the rules and I sat down and I just held her hand in complete silence. And the person who hadn't spoken in years turned to me and started speaking
Wow.
and asking
Mhm.
questions that showed that she was aware of what was going on around her, maybe not all the time, but enough to know to ask, are you with the American Red Cross?
Mm.
Are you, where are you from? You're not from Connecticut. Like, what? How the heck do you know that? Like, do you have a boyfriend? Little things. So we sat and talked, and I fell in love. And every time I would see her for the rest of the residency, she would talk to me, and even if it was across the room, we would make eye contact, and she would talk like the person who
Wow.
hadn't spoken in years. And
Mhm.
so that conversation about, like, when you find what you love, fear is an afterthought. That conversation of what are you built to do? Finding that mission in yourself, finding that passion in yourself. That was like like this for me. And I remember driving home. Well, actually, on the last day of the residency, I sat next to her bed and I held her hand and I told her that if I could play again, I was gonna come back and play for her, and I was gonna start a a series that was gonna bring all of my colleagues and friends from around the and mentors from around the world and bring them to her bedside. And so on the ride home, then that was like it was like, my heart was on fire. It was like,
Yeah.
"Okay, I need to learn how to play. The doctors aren't gonna figure out how to get all of the glass out. I'm just gonna have to figure out how to maneuver around it because
Wow.
I wanna play for Ruth. I wanna go and, like, have a conversation and give all of my love and years of care and what I remember, the love I had for that voice and the instrument. I wanna do that for Ruth. I wanna bring it to Ruth and bring it to people like Ruth. And so that was just a really clear moment of like, what am I gonna do? What I'm gonna do? Jump. Yes, I'm gonna do this. Let's go.
Wow.
And so
Mhm.
6 months later was the first concert at her bedside.
Wow.
And I got to watch what happens when music is introduced into spaces of isolation. And so
Right.
I got to watch her, you know, start off in total agony again of her body just like fighting the world. And I got to watch as we went through playing a Mozart viola quintet for her, that, her face relaxed, her mouth relaxed, her eyes opened, her shoulders came down, her
Wow.
breathing deepened. That was the impetus for starting Project Music Heals Us, a
Mhm.
nonprofit that now is, oh my gosh, 12 years old
Wow.
and has now reached around 30,000 Ruths around the globe.
Wow.
So
That's incredible.
yeah, and from that, it became very clear, I wanna play music. This is what music can do. And it sort of
Yeah.
refocused. It doesn't have to be this, like, mighty career. That feels like a hamster wheel, but it can be,
Mhm.
okay, that moment with Ruth, can I find that again? Can I find it here? Can I find it here? Can I Yeah, and so
Yeah.
that was a big moment in my life, a deciding
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah, that's an incredible story and so touching and so interesting how you actually kind of found your path away from the viola, which actually in turn like brought it back to viola and music and everything that you've ever wanted to do and are doing now. So that's really amazing. And speaking about Project Music Heals Us, how did you go about starting this organization and what challenges, if there were any, did you face starting this nonprofit?
Yeah. So starting a nonprofit, I had no idea I was starting a nonprofit with this journey. I just knew that I wanted to play for Ruth and other individuals in circumstances like Ruth. And so
Mhm,
originally I actually just applied for a fiscal sponsorship from an organization called Fractured Atlas that is a nonprofit that then will take donations that if you in order to accomplish pretty much anything in this world, you need to raise money. And
mhm,
so
yes.
so yeah, and so I knew I wanted to pay my friends to come and play. So I started by getting this fiscal sponsorship, started raising money that then went to Fractured Atlas and then would filter down to my project and started off in just looking around the area of New York and Connecticut where I was familiar with and finding as many locations like the one that I was working in to bring music into it. So we went into rehab centers, nursing homes, hospitals, food pantries. Yeah, the first season was that we did food drives. It was a joyful time of just like bringing my friends to come and take part in this mission. And the
Mm,
second season, I I already knew from the beginning that one of the spaces that I really wanted to interact with was prisons. I had
mhm,
a childhood friend who went to prison for 9 years and had the opportunity to love someone behind bars and
mhm,
hear about how awful our carceral system is. And so by the second season, I already was trying to figure out how to get into a prison. And turns
right.
out besides committing a crime, it's actually kind of hard to get into a prison. And so it took a lot of if you wanna get out. Yeah, it took a lot of phone calls and a lot of digging and a lot of, talking to people and as someone that, was and is innately shy, this was a big task, so I would say some of the challenges was like, whew, like, okay, I need to talk to this person. I need to talk to like a warden at a prison. I need to talk to like, all of these people I never, y- the governor of Connecticut, like,
Wow.
all of this. And so, but again, Heidi's statement of like, when you find what you love, fear becomes an afterthought. Like, I never thought I would have the guts to go and hold a conversation with these powerful people and I just saw it as what's got to happen. So
Right.
no one else is going to do it, so I have to do it. And so I would say it started bit by bit, with this location, that location, pulling in musicians, these tours, this budget. Next year it was higher budget, more locations, prisons. Third year, adding refugee camps. Fourth year, like just like every year it was like we'd look around and just realize the right people in the right place at the right time are the ones that are going to make the impact. And so,
Right.
and we just felt, all right, it's time. Yeah, and if you notice, I'm already saying "we." So that was one thing,
Mhm.
and, like, starting an organization again, I didn't know it was gonna be an organization, but
Right.
as I was always taught, people are drawn to passion, and,
Mhm.
it's an easy thing to say, but then to actually live it, you know, if I'm like, "No, you don't understand, like, we have to do this, we have to," and people see that, like, yeah, we do. You can light other
Yeah.
people up. And so
Mhm.
that was a fascinating journey of also, it started out with just like one person, one idea. What can one person do? Then friends and colleagues would join and say,
Right.
we want to help. Okay, how can I help? I am able to do this. Can I be a teammate in this way? Okay, yeah. And then, you know, building an advisory board, then growing to the state of, okay, I think it's time to be a nonprofit
Mhm.
and actually become official and get a board of directors and get set up properly. And so, yeah, it's been sort of just like a stepping stone journey of like never quite sure what is gonna come next, except like just I see the vision of like, well, this is where we need to be.
Mhm.
Now we go find the money. Now we find
Right.
find the infrastructure. We build the infrastructure and we go and get it. And so
Mhm.
now 12 years later, the nonprofit is in three distinct branches, one in prisons, one in hospitals, and one in international severely underserved communities. So we're in
Mhm.
the West Bank, in northern Iraq, and in Kenya, in Nairobi,
Wow.
Kenya, doing teaching, sending musicians there, occasionally actually even bringing musicians from those places back. We have a couple
Wow.
musicians who have gotten into American conservatories that,
Wow.
you know, spent their lives not able to go to school, not able to work, not able to, you know what life they could live. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, so three distinct branches of a 15-person board and a 10-person team that
Wow.
is like full time going around the clock. So it's wild. It's been a wild journey. I never, if you asked me
Yeah.
at like 15 years old, 21 years old, 24 years old, I would have had no idea that this was going to be such a big part of my life.
Thank you so much to Molly Carr for a great first part of her interview. I really appreciated her honesty about fear and motivation and loved hearing about her touching moments with Ruth. Stay tuned for part 2 coming out next week as she talks about her most memorable moments from Project Music Heals Us and joining the Juilliard String Quartet and faculty. Thank you so much for joining me on Backstage Classical Conversations. If you like this interview, please rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast on the platform you're using. You can follow us at Backstage Classical Podcast on Instagram or visit the website at backstageclassicalpodcast.com for more episodes and information. I'm Katrina Stroud, and it was great to see you here. Until next time, stay inspired and listen to the stories of others.